You're cute.
Hi there everyone, I'm Luke Hector and this is the Broken Meeple, a show where I devote my time to ranting and raving about board games, but usually more the latter part if we're truly honest. We'll get on with the review for March of the Ants in just a second, but first the sponsor would just like a quick word if you could just spare a minute.
As gamers, we find it hard to deal with empty shelves, some worse than others. You therefore want a supplier that has what you need at affordable prices and delivers on time. For me, that supplier is Kiender. They offer a discount on bulk purchases as well as a point scheme for future acquisitions down the line. If there's a hot title you're after, chances are Kiender's got it. Wingspan? Mine. Arc Nova? Mine. Eclipse? Actually I hate that game, it's terrible, but you might like it. If you use the referral link in the description below and sign up for a new account, you'll get 5% discount on your first order over £60. So let's make gaps in your collection a thing of the past. Get down to Kiender and start saving today. Thank you for listening and enjoy the rest of the video.
Get on with it.
So today we're taking a look at March of the Ants, the Evolved Edition from Ryan Swisher and Tim Eisner. This is from Weird City Games. You'll know I've done reviews of them in the past, like Canopy and Canopy Evergreen and Leaf. Lightweight, family weight games with nature themes is kind of their shtick. Well, here we've got another nature-themed game with ants, although this one isn't quite as lightweight as the others. If anything, this is probably the heaviest game they've put out. But the idea is that this is meant to be a sort of midweight at most, light to midweight 4X game. And if you don't know what 4X is, it's expand, exploit, explore, exterminate. And the idea is that these tend to be civilization games where you expand your civilization, tech it up, evolve it, make it better. You exploit the land for resources, so you collect, your grain and wood and whatever like that. You exterminate other players because civilizations need to conquer other players, that kind of thing. And you explore the map and you go find new stuff. So most games can't do all 4X's unless you have some big 4-hour monster for a game. I mean, I've recently played Europa Universalis, which, depending when this gets released, I'll have talked about on the podcast. But, that's a massive, pretty much one-day game in order to play that thing. And then other civilizations follow suit. Most of the time, even games that, like Empires of the Void and a few others, they will try to do 4X, but they tend to make it 3X. They always get one of the X's wrong. And even Twilight Imperium, as much as people like to say that's a 4X game, doesn't really feel much like exploration in that one, although we could argue that until the cows come home. So the idea is that this one is meant to be a 4X game in a much shorter space of time and a much smaller learning curve. I never played the original that this was based on, so I was very keen to try this out for the first time, particularly with an interesting theme. I mean, it's not just civilization or guys in space killing each other. No, it's ant colonies. Okay, that's something a bit different. I'll go with it. Question is, can it achieve that 4X status, and does it trim out too much from the heavier versions to make it worthwhile to play? March of the Ants is played over 4 rounds that function for the most part pretty much the same throughout. Every player takes care of an ant colony. You can have asymmetric versions or you can have the normal basic version, and most of the rules are kind of written on this aid, but the idea is that you'll play through 4 rounds. Firstly, with a worker phase where you do all your actions until everybody has passed and taken these rest tiles, of which there's so many of them in a round, and once the last one is taken, that's the end of the round. You'll then have a soldier phase where your ants in the various territories will battle other ants if you can't share the resource sites. Then you have a small little admin phase for feeding your ants and collecting other resources from the sites, and then a final phase where you score for objective cards that you may have played, as well as some area control on the board. But the meat is all the worker phase and the soldier phase. So how does that work? Essentially, you will take one of 5 different actions, and when you take an action, after you're done, your neighbors get to do a reaction based on whichever action you were doing. This is all to minimize downtime. So what can you do? Well, you can explore the map. So you start off with the Great Tunnel, which is your effective starting location, but then you can explore other hexes and join them up to form tunnels and blocked off routes. But each of these will have resource collection sites on them where your ants will go as soon as they are able to. So as soon as an ant goes on that space, if there's an empty site, it goes into it. Now, if other players decide to come along, let's get some yellow ones here, If they decide to come along and share the sites, that's fine, no problem. But should there be 2 players in the same hex and there isn't enough resource sites to go around, that's when it becomes contested and you start having battles later. The Great Tunnel is just one great big battleground. On top of that, you can also move your ants around and take them from your larva chamber, which are kind of like ant babies basically, and put them onto the board. But the main thing that you can also do is card related. So you can draw more cards, of which you can have a bunch of them in your hand. But these cards come in 3 different types. You've got colony calls, the blue ones, which are essentially objectives that you can play during a game. And if you meet the criteria at the end of a round in that slumber phase, you get to score more points. You've got event cards. What do you think an event card does? You play it, it does something cool. Bin it, there you go, job done. But then you also have green evolution cards. These come in head, thorax, and abdomen, like all the body parts for an ant. And the idea is that when you play these have special abilities that you will give your species. So you've got like a very basic setup to begin with, but if I play this like golden fire head, for example, then when I play cards for ferocity, we'll get onto that later, I can play additional cards. It gives you some benefit, but as well as the card ability, playing evolutions will give you other benefits during the game. And of course, you've got the heads, you've got the thorax, you've got abdomens, which I seem to be short on here, but effectively you can evolve your species and create what it is you want. So with these actions, players take it in turns. You take an action, the next players, your neighbors, will take a reaction, and then it'll carry round until all the rest tiles that are in play have been taken. End the round, go on to soldier phase. At this point, all the different areas battle, but the combat is fairly straightforward. You effectively total up all your ants that are in the region, plus any benefits from having lots of head evolutions, and then you are able to play a card face down. This is kind of similar to how the combat works in Dune Imperium, actually, where basically they have ferocity values on them. And with these ferocity values, in turn order, you have to decide, do I want to play a card face down or not to add to my battle strength? If you opt out, you opt out. But maybe I've got a nice juicy 4 here. Okay, I'm going to put that face down, and when everybody's ready, you flip it over, and this will add to your combat strength. Once you've worked out who wins and loses the combat, casualties are apportioned, usually 1 for 1 for the ones who got defeated, and 2 for 1 for the winner. So even the winner can lose ants in a combat. They're not necessarily safe from taking casualties. But all these battles will take place all over the hexes, and this is kind of how all 4 rounds will play out. Players will take it in turns to do the different actions. Then they all battle for area control effectively and harvesting all the resources. Then you collect what you get the rewards from what you've fought for, and then some extra little objective goals. Once you get to the end of 4 rounds, there is some little additional endgame scoring for having the most food, having the most babies, etc. And of course, you then total up the VPs, and the one with the most,
of course!
Okay, very general overview there. So we'll get on to the positives. First off, the rule set for this, even though it does generate a few FAQ moments at times, I haven't had that many of them, this is a very streamlined rule set, particularly from the original one. I had to look at the original rule book and sort of tried to convert it with this one. It's like, oh yeah, there were a few little clunky bits in there. But this version is actually pretty neat. You've got a decent reference on the back. It could be a little better, but for the most part, it will do the job. But when I read the rules to this in this book, I thought it was actually fairly easy to understand, and there's a lot of decent examples set out. So you've got like a full battle example here. You've got a full centipede example. We'll get onto that in a minute. You've got, a full Great Tunnel battle example. So it does go into detail in all the rules that it explains, but there's not a huge amount of rules in place, and finally, people realise that having reference aids is a good thing. I mean, for starters, you've got a decent reference aid here that tells you like how you score points and everything you need to know about the battle step, like nothing is missed out here. And then you've got a decent kind of reference aid on your board. I mean, it tells you how each phase works. This is effectively your player board and your reference aid. I like it when games combine this kind of thing. Iconography could be a little better in places. Probably the one negative I will say is that the iconography is not as intuitive as I would like. There are 1 or 2 where I'm like, so what does that mean? So hang on, that means I can move a baby from here to just the tunnel or the tunnel and the others? I'm not entirely sure. It maybe would have been nice if the reference aid, instead of sort of telling you how you scored points, which, there's not that many things to remember for that, maybe if one side actually just had all the reaction icons and stuff on it, rather than having to check the back of the book, for example. It's a small little blemish, but like I said, they put double-sided reference aids, and they put a lot of reference aids on your player board, so they've gone a lot further than a few publishers I've been noticing lately.
How dare you!
The rule set is fairly streamlined. This is definitely probably one of the easiest 4X games I've played, and it does actually achieve all 4Xs. I'm not joking, it has all 4 of them. I mean, for starters, you're exterminating other ants. Well, yeah, that happens. You're flying for all these resource sites, so yes, you're killing other ants off. This is quite an in-your-face game, alright? Don't try to play this passively, because it ain't gonna go too well, or it certainly ain't gonna stay passive for you, but let's say that.
Nothing but blue skies.
Boy, that escalated quickly.
You're evolving, so expanding your ants, because you're playing these evolution cards to make them better and create your own unique species. You are exploring the map. You know, the map just starts as this tunnel to begin with, and then you explore hexes and, you know, you open up the meadow. It's not like there's a huge amount of surprises in the exploration, most of these tiles kind of function in the same way. It's mostly just what bonuses do they have and whether they have centipedes or wormholes on them. Yeah, as in literal wormholes. That's really clever. I gotta give you props for that. But, you know, that is still exploration. So we've done exterminate, we've done expand, we've done explore, and exploit. You're actively going onto these collection sites with your ants and getting resources. You're getting food, you're getting more babies, you're drawing more cards. So all 4Xs are achieved, which is a lot more than a lot of these games that can be heavier. And I'm very pleased to see how they've managed to do that with a fairly small scope compared to a lot of these bigger games. In terms of the presentation, this is definitely a step up from the previous edition. It is very nice and colourful. The artwork, particularly on these meadow tiles, is really good. I mean, when you build this out, it really does look like a cool little zoomed-in garden with everything kind of like, you know, it's almost a bit like looking at Honey, I Shrunk Your Kids, like top down. You know, you realise that this is literally just a tiny path, but you are an ant. Everything is bigger for you. But, you know, your boards are good. The artwork on the cards is, decent. You know, it varies. You know, some of them look a little better than others, but overall it's just a very nice colourful picture that's done. And then you've got very nice components for a lot of things. I mean, you've got these big centipede tokens. Your ants are these little wooden pieces. I mean, this is the evolved edition. I can't remember if there's a retail one that maybe used tokens, but this particular version is not much more expensive anyway. And you know, these wooden tokens are nice. You know, you've got them, but notice the little boxes. Yep, something that Weird City Games likes to do is do boxes. So I've got one box here for, you know, various other tokens that I've taken out, but this is effectively what's in here. You've got boxes that fit in there nice and snug that hold the components for you. Now, some of it's a little overkill. I mean, you don't need this big a box for the hexes, and you certainly don't need a box this big for the cards, but there's only so many components in the game, so I guess they got to use the space somehow. But I love the fact that they actually bothered to put some storage containers to make it easy to put away, but also quite easy to set up. This is a very quick game to get on the table. You basically just put the Great Tunnel down, do a little bit of organising with the tiles, shuffle all these cards, everybody takes their player board, takes their little box, and distributes a few babies and ants and cards necessary. That's pretty much it. I mean, a few rest tiles here and there and, you know, just a couple of other tokens, but that's essentially it. You could be up and running with this game in a pretty short space of time. Again, better than a lot of other 4X games that require a mammoth of setup.
Making it bigger doesn't make it clearer.
I like the way they've tried to mitigate downtime in this. We'll get onto player count a little bit in the negative section, but they have tried to mitigate the downtime aspect by doing these reactions as part of a turn. So yes, I'm here doing, let's say I'm going to play this card, Summer Storm, and it does these, and right, my turn is done. And then because I played a card, the neighbours can discard and redraw a card. It means that not only are you interested in the board state from an interaction perspective, because you do need to pay attention to what other players are doing. This is not a solitaire game by any stretch of the word, but you also are interested in what they do in their action because you're going to get to do something straight after. And it means that you don't have a lot of time where you're sat around doing nothing. You will, especially in a 4-player game, I mean, a 3-player game, you're going to be acting all the time. But even in 4, there's only one turn that you do next to nothing. And even then, you're still interested in what's going on. But every other point in that 4-player game, you're either going to be doing a turn yourself or you're going to be taking a reaction from someone else's turn. You won't necessarily be able to do the reaction always. I mean, maybe I don't want to discard and redraw a card. Maybe I don't have any babies to transfer into the meadow. Well, that's part of the game. You don't want to give your opponents too much stuff to do. But it's great that you have that facility in place and they didn't just simply go, right, one player takes all their turn, then next player takes all their turn, then next player takes all their turn, and in a 5-player game you could be waiting for eons.
Are we there yet?
The game is definitely interactive. I mean, you are going to be in each other's faces, you know, fighting each other for control. We did have one game where everybody went off into their own direction and essentially tried to play a fairly, like, passive game. That works up to a point, but if you want to really win out, you want to get involved in some battles, because not only are you hurting other opponents' economy, but you're also getting some victory points for winning those battles. And I remember in that game, we were passive for a bit, and then I was like, nope, kill. You know, just like went out and killed others. The last game I played the previous night, actually, before this review, was pretty evil. I mean, it didn't take long for everybody to get stuck in trying to eat each other. Because you look at one player and you think, you can exploit quite a lot with your evolutions and those hexes. You know what? Beep, 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 beep. I want to come in. And it's not even necessarily I'm going to come in to eat all your ants, even though that's pretty funny. But it's also the fact that you can share these hexes as well. So I get this hex here with 4 collection sites. Somebody goes in with 2 ants. And I'm like, well, you know what? I'm going to put 2 ants in here as well. Here we go. We have the other sites. And you think, yeah, we can all live in harmony for about 5 seconds. Because the other player inevitably doesn't like the fact that he's sharing at you, and then just basically sticks in more ants, and then you got to have a fight.
God's sake, why is it we can't learn to live together? You're right, Norman.
You're going to get in each other's faces. It's an interactive game. It's not a sit around and do your own thing game. You need to pay attention to others, and you are going to get into fights. If you're after that sort of game, then this is going to give you it in spades. But bearing in mind, it can also be a little bit on the mean side. And this is kind of a positive and a negative. Because, yeah, you would expect in a game where you're fighting each other for supremacy, you're going to have times where it gets a little bit on the mean side. But this one does get pretty mean. And recovery is not always the easiest thing to do. Because bear in mind, you've only got 4 rounds. You can play a 5-round epic game, but then the game is really, I think, outstaying its welcome at that point. But you know, in the 4-round game, if you have a really terrible round because somebody, you know, comes along, kills half your colony, Sparrow attacks the other one. I mean, that card in this game is brutal. You could really best someone over with a Sparrow attack. But it does mean that when you do end up in a backwards position, it's tricky to pull yourself back. Not impossible, but it's tricky, you know, and it does depend on what other players are doing. And so it can feel a little bit brutal at times. You may be in a position where you feel like, I'm not sure if I got a chance to win this game. But other than that, we've had a fair few tight games. The last game was literally, I think, 2 points between the top 3 players, and I only won on a tiebreaker. I nearly lost, and it was only by a couple of ants on the board. That was like the tiebreaker. So the games can be pretty close, and points, you don't score a lot. I mean, I'm wondering why the token for the score track gives you like a plus 50 thing. It goes up to 50 points, but your token can flip over and to be plus 50. I'm not even entirely certain it's possible to get anywhere near 50 points, let alone score more than it. Maybe it's like that for the 5-round game. Maybe in a 5-round game you could get closer to 50, but yeah, otherwise 50 is pretty hard to do. So this is a low-scoring game. Every point matters, and it's good that your turns feel meaningful, but it's also good that your actions feel like they have meaning as well.
Isn't that lovely?
There's enough variety in this game to keep it sort of fresh each time, up to a point. You do have to do the same kind of thing most games. You know, go out into the meadow, get resources, and kill each other. That's fine, but these cards are kind of one of the highlights of the game because these will shape what it is you're trying to do for victory points a lot of the time. The events are the events. You play the events and they do stuff. But the colony goals, you only play 2 of them. But if you get these out early, which playing them late is kind of a waste of time, but if you can play them early, then you basically have something that says, all right, maybe I should aim for this kind of thing during a game. I mean, epic stores. When played, get a food, and each slumber pay 1 or 2 food to score. Okay, so if I can try and harvest all the food sites and get an excess of food, then maybe I can do something with that. You know, it's going to be tricky to do that, but it can work. And so these, again, lead you to a nice kind of a path for the game. And I do love that the cost for these, having to spend your own babies and ants to pay for these cards, man, that is a tough decision to decide which ants you're going to take off the board in order to pay for the cards. It's like, oh, it's such a... You want to play this 4x evolution, you know, because it means that when I pay for a card for at least 1 ant, I can reduce the total cost. It's amazing, but I've got to take 2 actual ants off the meadow, and I need that for resource gathering. It's like, such a tough decision. But you know, the evolution cards are where this game's at, and there's quite a few of them, a decent amount of abdomens, thoraxes, and heads. There's no duplicates for them, you know, there's a lot of different varieties, and if you can get a bunch of these out, you can create, again, some unique path or unique strategy that you're following. If you don't evolve yourself at all, and you're kind of in for a slightly boring game at that point, but honestly, if you're not playing evolutions, you're kind of asking to get killed anyway, because you're really missing out on some core benefits and abilities if you just ignore evolutions. I don't think anybody's tried to ignore them entirely, and honestly, I don't think I would recommend trying, but I don't know, maybe in one game I'd like to see someone try. Don't do any evolutions whatsoever, and see if you stand even a remote chance of winning. I'm not sure you could. So we'll get on to a few negatives here. The first one, I mentioned about the player count. Now, you are mitigating on the downtime front. You know, you're involved for more of the game than you would be. But player scaling is still a little bit iffy, because a two-player game doesn't explore a lot, doesn't get out and do a lot, and you are basically fighting each other. This game kind of works at 2 players, but it's not the first game I would pull out for 2 players. 3 and 4 are kind of the sweet spot. You want to have more than just one player to fight, but you also want a few more hexes to be distributed around, and 3 and 4 takes full advantage of the whole, like, neighbors get to do a reaction rule. So I actually find that 3 to 4 is the sweet spot, and yeah, 4 does work very well. Yes, there's 1 turn, you don't get to do anything, but turns aren't that long in this game, and 4 people on this map does mean a lot of contention, a lot of you know, fights breaking out, and that works. 5 kind of just outstays its welcome a bit. You know, when you've got to do 5 players, the game will take longer, because yes, it's only 4 rounds, but the game doesn't scale lengthwise to say, oh, no matter what player count you're at, it will take this long. No, you're going to take longer per player. And the box does say 60 to 90 minutes. That's pretty optimistic. I mean, you're really, for a 4 to 5 player game, you're easily looking at 2 hours plus. Yeah, maybe not to the crazy length of 2.5, although maybe your first game with a teach and a lot of players could be that long. But yeah, 60 to 90 is really going to be your solo, your 2 players, and if you're fast, your 3 player games. You know, 60 to 90 for a 4 player, I don't even think is humanly possible. I've never seen it go that short. So, a little bit optimistic on that front. But to be honest, 4x in 2 hours is still hard to achieve. I mean, how many of these other games that I've mentioned, like the Civilizations and Twilight Imperiums and all these other games that have 4x style gameplay, how many of them take 2 hours? It's not a lot. And if they do take 2 hours, are you sure they're 4x and they don't miss out, say, Explore, or one of the other X's in the group?
He's out of line, but he's right.
The one main mechanic that I think is a little bit clunky and doesn't work quite as well as I would like are these centipedes, and it's a shame, because the centipede is a cool thing. It's a predator of the ants, therefore if these centipedes pop up on the hexes, it's gonna hurt. You know, you can kill them for spoils, but at the end of the day, these things are here to eat you. But the way they're handled in this game, I think, doesn't quite work that well. Because firstly, you have to get through a bunch of hexes before they even turn up. You have 8, like in a 4-player game, you've got 2 per player, so 8 in a 4-player game, of these starter hexes to get through first before you even get to the normal tiles where a centipede might even appear. And 8 tiles is a lot to explore. A lot of players won't explore that much. So just getting through this stack is hard enough. And then you might do 2 or 3 of these other ones and not see a single centipede. So they don't even come out every game, honestly. But even when they do come out, man, are they brutal. You've got a strength track for the centipedes on the scoreboard here, and every time a centipede comes out, this increases. That in itself is not the worry, though. The worry is that they flip over a card at random for their ferocity, and if it's a 1, like this one is, you add to their strength on the track, and then flip over another 1. So it gets +1 strength on there, as well as an additional card for ferocity, which could chain react again. They call it unpredictable foe. I call it brutal as fuck.
John Spartan, you are fined 1 credit for a violation of the verbal morality statute.
And it's not even just that aspect that's the brutal part. The way you fight them as normal, and they fight every single player, but if you win against them, you still lose half of your ants in the colony. But if you lose, every single one of your ants dies, which can happen with normal battles, but still, it's just outright kill. But the fact that it attacks people in turn, can mess people over quite a lot because they go after the player with the most ants first. So they first attack that player. Even if that player wins against the centipede, they lose half their ants. And if the place is still contested, they still continue fighting. But half their ants are gone, which means the other player who didn't have to fight the centipede now has a big advantage to the person who did fight the centipede. I don't know if I sit well with that. You can argue it's kind of like a balancing act to say, well, you got some reward for the centipede, but now you're about to lose the hex. I'd rather keep the hex personally than get whatever the centipede is likely to give me, especially as it kills half my ants and isn't even a guaranteed win at that. It just kind of feels maybe like it's not an afterthought. It's clearly put into the game because it fits the theme, but I feel like maybe a little bit more development should have been done on these, especially given that, you know, they can be a major part of your game, but they also might not even feature. You know, I would have thought that maybe some of these should have just come out periodically as the game goes on, like maybe at round 3 a centipede pops up somewhere, just so that the mechanic gets used. But, you know, half the games I've played, the centipedes have not even appeared. They will appear more likely in a high player count game, but bear in mind you use 2 of these per player for the starter hexes. So even with 5 of you, you're still going to get through 10 of them, and that's assuming that everybody does exploration. Some people might not. If you're going to explore, fine, you go explore the hexes and then I'll come and kill you later.
Then what if we throw our laundry in with yours? Would that be acceptable?
A little small point with the cards as well. The balance is fine, although some of these like evolutions do feel a little bit better or worse than others. I mean, making your cards cheaper, getting additional babies if you occupy certain sites, or making your actions better is naturally going to be really good. But there are 1 or 2 here which are just like a little bit like, doesn't really make a huge amount of difference. Like the thief's abdomen here, it's great that you feed 2 fewer ants, but the idea that everybody else feeds 1 additional ant doesn't usually make a huge amount of difference with this card, at least not from experience. And then you've got like the traitorous head, that if you would battle a centipede, you can lose an ant instead, and you get victory points for each hex you inhabit with a centipede. Well, the centipedes barely appear, you're losing an ant anyway, and if you're in a hex with other ants, then if the other ants kill the centipede goes away. So a lot of the times that won't even trigger, and yet it requires you to spend 2 ants from the board to play this card. It's just like, you know what, as head evolutions go, I can think of a few that are a damn sight better, like getting a victory point every time you play a veracity card, or, you know, you're able to take movement steps before each battle. You know, some of that is a lot more powerful. It's not that I've seen cards be too powerful, like if somebody gets the card it's overpowered, but there's definitely a few that are more situational. And I mentioned Sparrow Attack. Sparrow Attack is a little bit painful. Basically it says that every player, oh here we go, yep, found it. I love the picture though, because it literally does have sparrows eating ants. But you choose a hex you inhabit, all players lose but 1 ant from that hex. That isn't, oh my god, if you're sitting there with about 6 ants and somebody just comes in with 1 and plays this card, oh my god, does that hurt. I mean, it really hurts to lose about 5 of your ants in one go because of a single card that isn't even that difficult to play. I mean, it costs 2 of your babies. You can get babies fairly well in this game. It's not that expensive. But, you know, if you don't warn people this card is in the game, then you will get times where somebody has a lot of ants and doesn't realize this is a thing, and then a bunch of their ants go. That hurts. This one hurts a lot, and it's definitely one of the most powerful cards that there is in this. The colony goals as well feel very hard to achieve a lot of the time. I mean, if you're playing these in round 3 and 4, you might as well not even play the card. It's pretty hard to actually do well at these at that stage. But, you know, you can draw a bunch of these cards and just not get any use out of them. Now, the reaction for discard and redraw happens a lot in this game, so there is a decent amount of mitigation to get rid of cards that you don't like, but you know, these colony goals are very hard to achieve sometimes. I mean, you know, you can get 1, 2, or 3 points for this one, right? You have to score for hexes where you inhabit only 1 collection site. Specifically only 1, right? And it's 1 point for 2 of those, 2 points for 3 of those, 3 points for 5 of those. 5 hexes where you're hoping to have only 1 collection site? Good luck achieving that. And a bunch of these other ones feel kind of the same. Trying to score for some of these colony goals becomes a chore in itself, and you'll be lucky to get maybe a couple of points out of some of them. You know, ones where you get to discard cards and a few of these other bits are certainly easier to do, but relying on the area control aspect, some of these colony goals are just a little bit too tricky, and maybe I would have liked if they were just a bit, like, I don't know, simpler to achieve or gave you a better benefit when you played them. I find I don't play a lot of colony goals in the games that I've played of this, and I've still won the game. I feel like, you know, there should be maybe a little bit more importance placed on them, and as such it feels like, oh, well, if I can play them I will, but it's very difficult to actually make good use of them sometimes. So, the solo mode. You can play this solo with a variant they call Rise of the Centipedes. It's, you know, not too complicated. I mean, you've only got basically this rule sheet to go by. You can also play it in co-op mode in the same deal. And the idea is that you play against the centipedes. So the centipedes come onto the board, they have evolving strength. Some cards are taken from the deck, which essentially when you flip them over, depending what type of card they are, the centipedes will react. Like they'll attack and get more strength, they'll move around the board, more will come out, that kind of thing. And basically you have to survive against them. Now the solo mode, from a rules perspective, is a little bit on the clunky side, because you've only got this rule sheet to tell you the majority of the game. And if you look on BGG, there's a fair few threads that have popped up with rule clarifications for solo-specific bits. So I feel like maybe the rulebook was developed well for the multiplayer, but the solo sheet might have missed a few steps. On top of that though, remember what I said about the game being brutal with regards to particularly the centipedes and the fact that you're getting attacked a lot? That doesn't even begin to describe the level of brutality that is in the solo mode and co-op. Particularly if you play the co-op at high player counts.
Just give us a fucking chance, you son of a bitch!
It's actually quite infamous at the moment, if you look on the BGG threads, that 4-player co-op of this is one of the hardest co-op experiences some people have come across. It is just insane. And a lot of the problem is that the reactions of the centipedes is very swingy. It is effectively down to luck. You don't have a lot of control over what the centipedes are going to do. It's more how you're going to cope. But the centipede strength can snowball really quickly, way beyond the capabilities of a player to be able to match. So the co-op and solo mode, I do think it's probably a bit easier to win it as solo, like true solo, than it is co-op. But man, I mean, this will punch you to death if you let it. And sometimes you can't do much but let it. It's just, it borderlines that point between not being fun for how brutal it is. If you want a swingy, high challenge game, then this is definitely for you. You will get that. You know, you might have to learn a few of these extra bits of rules, maybe browse a couple of forums here and there, but you know, if you want it to be stupidly brutal while still being reasonably thematic and stuff, then yeah, you will get that here. But I personally just found it a little bit too much, you know, for the swingy nature that it has. A lot of the times I played this, I just felt like I had no chance. You know, I think I've beaten it once, and I swear that was down to luck as well, like luck of what cards came out for the centipede reactions and stuff. It's tricky to tell if I won it by skill or anything like that. And really, as much as it's not a bad attempt at it, I just feel like I want to play this multiplayer. I want the ants, I want the centipedes to be like an external threat, and to play this as a competitive game. I think the co-op is not as good as competitive, and solo is better than the co-op. I think it's easier to win it as a true solo, because you get a couple of extra little benefits. But yeah, personally I think this maybe should have just stuck with being a multiplayer one. So that is March of the Ants. Was it worth the anticipation to play this game? For the most part, yes. I mean, there's certainly some blemishes I have. I do think that some mechanics are maybe needed a little bit more development. We can gloss over the solo mode to some extent, although if you are going to throw a solo mode and a co-op mode in, you need to make sure it's robust, and I think that maybe it's just a bit too swingy and brutal for my liking. And the game player scaling can outstay its welcome a little bit, especially at the 5-player count, but for the most part you are able to keep this within a 2-hour time frame, and 3 and 4 players is definitely the sweet spot for it. But it's a well-produced game. It's definitely got the 4 X's down to a T. It's managed to achieve them, and it is thematic. You've got some cool like path to victory you can do with these cards, and it's definitely a very interactive game. You know, you're in each other's faces fighting each other's ants, but because of those reactions that you do on other players' turns, the downtime is mitigated to a great extent. It's definitely like a pretty cool area control 4X style game that does a decent job, but maybe doesn't quite do like an amazing job at it. You know, it's a good game and I'm glad to have played it, and I certainly would be up for playing it. I just don't know how often I would pull this out. You know, particularly if I didn't have like exactly 4 players to play it, maybe 3. But even 3, I'd be like, I don't know, I feel like I'd want a 4th in here somewhere. And if you're teaching new players, you've got to warn them about stuff like the sparrow attack and how brutal some of it can be. And 1 or 2 players have come away from this being a little bit bummed out by how they might have got brutalized in 1 turn and found it a little bit tricky to pull themselves back, particularly if they couldn't find any decent cards to work with on that front. But I've had some close games of this as well. The rule set is definitely streamlined from its original version, and it's not a particularly hard game to learn. A few FAQ moments here and there, but they've done a good job with some of these reference aids. Maybe the iconography going to be a little bit better in places, but yeah, there's just a few blemishes that stop it being great. But overall, it's still good. I'd give this one a 7 out of 10 overall. It's a good game. Definitely up for playing it if somebody puts it on the table. Just might not be one that I would want to pull out all the time. Like, just once in a while, I feel like, you know what, I want a 4X game and I don't want it to take forever. I'll bring this one out, because you're still looking at a good 2 hours to really get a decent game of this played. And if you want to play the epic variant so that you can actually do more with these evolutions, it's going to take even longer. And at that point, you might be thinking, why don't I just play one of the heavier 4X games at that stage? So, and centipedes, you know, a mechanic that may show itself, but then for the most part it might not even work properly when it does. You know, there are some things that get in the way. But overall, it's still a solid game. I still enjoy it. Just, like I say, was hoping it would, like, absolutely blow my mind. It doesn't do that, but I'm happy for it. You know, I think it's pretty solid. I'm glad to have played it. 7 out of 10. It's a good game. So that's it for me on this episode of The Broken Meeple. If you like what you see, then please thumb it up on YouTube and thumb it up on Board Game Geek when it goes live on the page. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Did you play the original version, or if you only played this version, what are your thoughts, good and bad? Let's get them in the comments. Let's bump up that engagement factor. Show the algorithm that I exist, you know, because lately it's been a little bit tricksy on that. But let's get some discussions. What do you think of the multiplayer? What do you think of the co-op? What do you think of the solo? Do you agree that it's too brutal? You know, do you think it shouldn't have been in there? Do you like the centipedes? Do you not? And what have you found it like at, say, 2 players versus 5 players? You know, I'll be interested to get your thoughts as well. Until next time, remember, regardless of whether you can fend off the hungry centipede or not, it's still only a game. So bye for now.